Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, I have a bit of a gaming video. And particularly, it's going to be for Tiny D6, as I've invited Alan Bahr over to my channel. He is the head, if you will, the head developer. I guess you'd call him the owner of Gallant Knight Games, and we're going to be talking about Tiny Spies, Gallant Knight Games, and some other things as well. So I want you to just well, the main focus when we put the video together was originally to discuss Tiny Spies and the chase mechanics for Tiny Spies. It kind of turned into more of a full podcast type deal. I mean, it was short, but yeah, that's kind of what it turned into. It kind of unraveled. But so I'm going to do that video. But one thing I want to say is for anyone who's never heard of Gallant Knight Games but is interested in tabletop gaming, I would definitely recommend going to check out Gallant Knight Games website. I'll try to remember to put a link in the video description down below, as they have multiple different types of games, everything from the more kind of advanced, number crunchy, heavy type games, sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, but that isn't Dungeons and Dragons, as well as they also have a lot of rules light type games, which I really enjoy their rules lights game because you can kind of make them a little bit more advanced without getting crazy or turning it into a number crunch vest, stuff like that. Finally, the next thing I want to state is one way to support my channel. If you want to give my channel additional support, is by going to my Patreon channel and checking that out, or my Patreon, which I'll have a link down below in the video description. But another great way of supporting the channel also is liking, commenting, and subscribing, and also sharing these videos around. Kind of need to get that word of mouth because organic growth on YouTube is kind of dead, and I kind of have to fight against up the hill constantly, it feels like. But anyway, I'm going to leave it all go with that. I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm going to let the footage roll from our discussion about Gallant Knight Games and Tiny Spies, as well as other things when it comes related to gaming. Hopefully, you folks all enjoy the video, and I'll get back to you once the footage is done. Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today I am with Alan from Gallant Knight Games. We're going to talk a little bit about Gallant Knight Games, some projects that they're coming up with, and we're also talking about Tiny Spies, folks. We're going to do a bit of a tutorial on chase mechanics, and
Yeah.
we're going to discuss the different rules for that. Because personally, while I noticed a lot of the Tiny D6 games have their own different types of special rules, I personally feel the chase mechanics is the more complex of the special rules. For anyone familiar with Tiny Gunslingers, there's kind of like this quick draw mechanic that involves essentially playing a mini game of blackjack, if you will. Um, I want to say with Mecha and Monsters, it's more like the building mechanics and the mech and monster mechanics. You know, smashing into buildings. You got the random building generation, stuff of that nature. And Tiny Dungeons, I would say, is the magic. Tiny Frontiers, I really don't know because I haven't played Tiny Frontiers all that much. I haven't really looked into it. Uh, I don't know if it's really considered a sin within Gallant Knight Games, but even though Mecha Monsters was made as an expansion for Tiny Frontiers, I kind of just do Mecha and Monsters as Mecha and Monsters. I like the idea of kind of doing like the Pacific Rim giant robots smashing into giant monsters.
Hey, if you're having fun with the game, there's no sin, right?
There you go. I like the attitude on that one. So, Alan, please go ahead, take a moment to introduce yourself, talk a bit
Yes.
about Gallant Knight Games.
Sure. So I'm Alan Bahr. I am the lead designer and the publisher at Gallant Knight Games. I design 90% of what we publish. If it coming out from Gallant, it's got my hands in it, probably in a significant fashion. Um, I also do things for other companies. I've had games published by Osprey Games. I've worked on stuff for Steamforge Games, stuff all over the years, various other companies. So I do games. I like RPGs. That's my thing. So I don't know what else, like award-winning, best-selling. Those are some of the fancy words I can throw around.
Well, go ahead, throw them around if you want to throw them around.
I'm award-winning and best-selling, so there we go. Covered that. Boom, done.
Boom, done. I also see Gallant Knight Games has some upcoming projects. We should talk a little bit about those.
Yeah. So right now on Kickstarter for the next 2 weeks, we launched it today. So 2 weeks from when we're recording this, we have a game called The Path of the Aramthir, which is a one GM, one player, and a group or solo friendly tabletop role playing game in a genre called progression fantasy, which is kind of like a wuxia films or fighting video games, or that idea of you have to fight to get stronger. If you've seen Dragon Ball Z, that's a progression fantasy, right?
Okay.
That kind of idea of leveling up to the next power level so you can beat the bad guy. And so it's for one GM, one player, but it can also be played by yourself or with a normal group, with the expanded sort of troop and ensemble play. And it's set in a pre-medieval kind of Celtic fantasy world. And so you'll go around fighting monsters, fighting enemies to learn their techniques, to learn new powers as you try to explore this continent. It's developed by Alex T from Black Oath Entertainment, who does really great evocative solo games. And, as Gallant Knight Games, we're pleased to be publishing it. So
Cool. Very cool. Um, you also have a product coming out soon ish. Tiny Cyberpunk. Am I mistaken?
yeah, so we ran the Kickstarter for that in December, and it's currently going through the Kickstarter in development stuff. My hope is that we'll be shipping Kickstarter backers by the summer.
Nice.
So, but those kind of things, projects are always subject to change. So,
Um. Okay. Okay. You think we should get started with the mechanics tutorial here, the rules questions
if
of
you
the
want, I'm just
chase
a guest here.
mechanics?
You run your thing.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're kind of gonna go over the chase mechanics of Tiny Spies.
Okay.
Now, one thing I'm going to throw out there right off the bat for folks that are brand new to Tiny Spies and the other Tiny D6 games, definitely have some kind of tokens available. No matter if
Yeah.
it's coins, poker chips.
Even a dice you can move up and down. That is different, like a big D20 or something, right?
Yeah. My group, we actually use poker chips because we
Sure.
actually have a poker set where sometimes we're doing the whole James Bond poker scene at the kind of like the Casino Royale stuff. So having poker chips available is
Sure.
honestly, in my opinion, the best way to go if you have like a whole set available. Um, but so basically, to start off, just kind of go step by step. So essentially, the first step before you get the chase even going is establishing momentum, and that is the very first round only.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, there's a nice chart that explains the different areas
Yeah.
of of how much momentum you get based on what the factors are. Now, the one thing I'm actually interested in knowing, and I wasn't
Sure.
sure how to go about this because there is players outnumbered by their opponents, and then I believe there's also one for players outnumbering the opponents. Am I
Yeah.
mistaken?
So the idea of the momentum is just kind of a visual way to track who's got sort of the momentum in the chase, right? Who's gaining or being gained on, right?
Um,
And good.
I was going to say the question I really have for that one off the top
Yeah.
is when we did the chase, it was my spy in his super spy car, and it was
Hmm.
it was two Russian KGB agents in a car.
Yeah.
And when we did that, we treated it as essentially equals because it
Yeah.
was
I
like
would
one
say
versus one.
it's when we say outnumbered, obviously there's some leeway there. The GM has to use their best judgment, but my rule of thumb is it's about how many people are moving individually,
Okay.
right? So if it's just two cars, no matter how many people in, the idea is that when you outnumber somebody in a chase, it's easier to corner them and trap them, so you have an advantage, right?
Hmm.
But if you're both each in one car, and there's only two parties in the chase, then there's no advantage, no matter how many people are in the car, right?
Okay. That's kind of how I interpret that actually, which
Yeah,
has
absolutely.
worked out. Um, Players are in a faster mode of transportation. I would say that's very clear. Opponents are in faster mode of transportation. Players have a head start. Crowded area. I mean, a lot of these are really clear. Even the advanced technology to me is really clear because essentially they were kind of in a plain Jane black, European type car, where I'm in James Bond type super spy car
Sure.
with oil slicks, the whole 9 yards. Um, I would think probably really the only area that doesn't really matter is if your car is bulletproof, realistically, because that really doesn't have any, I want to say, guidance on the chase, or not necessarily guidance, but doesn't really have any advantage on the chase. It just kind of protects you from being shot.
Yeah,
Where
I
like your
mean,
smokes and oil slicks.
the goal of Tiny D6 is that it's minimalist. So the question is generally not, what are the details of the resolution, but what is the fastest, most logical resolution so we can keep moving,
Yeah,
right? And you're right. Like to me, bulletproof is that's about protecting the passengers or the people in on the interior, so it's irrelevant for the chase itself.
okay.
The advanced technology clause is more like, oh, my car has radar or extra cameras or GPS tracking, something that would allow you to conduct the chase from a position of advantage.
um, okay. So I mean that pretty much covers establishing the momentum, and essentially, there's a modifier that kind of tax your points either
Right.
plus or minus based on
Yep.
whatever the modifier is. Now the next part is the bid, where now this is a first round only.
Well, before we jump in there,
Okay.
uh, the idea of the momentum is that if you are the players, to catch somebody, you have to reduce the momentum pool to zero, or to get away, you have to double your starting momentum,
Oh
which
yeah.
represents having made enough progress to lose them.
Oh yeah, that was on the next page. I was
Right.
sorry. I was just reading down the steps of a chase.
No, no, you're good. You're
Didn't
good.
think about the
I just
escaping and capturing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But contextually, if somebody's listening to this, I want them to understand like the reason momentum exists is it measures the position between the parties in the chase,
Gotcha.
and
And
so that's how you know you've won or been caught.
yeah, and that's definitely going to be important.
Yeah, it's a bit important. Yeah.
Um, so now, of course, then the next step is the bid, and that's the
Yep.
first round or any round where a previous maneuver does not determine order, which I think pretty much I didn't notice any. I think pretty much none of the maneuvers really determines the order. I think it's pretty much the bid itself.
The fast turn maneuver can impact who goes first.
Okay, sorry, missed it. Oh yeah, there it is. Um, so essentially, what you do is with the bid, for anyone who's not aware, you're doing that with your starting momentum
Yep.
tokens. So once you figure
Yep.
out your momentum, then that's when you're placing your bids. Now the players they bid first,
Yep.
and they can actually bid zero, and then of course it goes back and forth until
Right.
essentially the chase is won. Because essentially then the
Yep.
enemy, the game master, whoever's playing the enemy opponents, they could
Right.
bid one, then the players can counter bid with two, and it can keep going back and forth until you've established the final bids.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
the question I have with the bids is, and I don't know if maybe I just missed it when I was reading over it, but
Sure.
after the bids are done, like say I bid 3 tokens, do I lose those 3 tokens?
Yeah. So if you look at that, the last line on page 42 tells you that after one side has passed, assuming two sides you know in
Oh,
a chase, you make all modifications to momentum as appropriate based on the winning bid, and then you get moving into maneuvers.
okay. Okay. See, I did that last section. I had a bit of a misunderstanding there on how that worked. And then yeah, then we get into the chase
So
itself.
maybe a bit of an example would be good here. So let's say you and I are in a chase, right? And let's say you start with two momentum. I'm the GM. I'm having some spies chase you, right?
Okay.
You get to determine how much you want to spend first. So you decide how important it is to you that you go first. Now, keeping in mind that if you have 0 momentum at the end of a turn, you're caught.
Okay.
Right? And so you might be like, I've been 0, and I go, and you have to get to 4 to get away, basically, because you have to double your starting momentum.
Yes.
And so I might go, okay, well, I want these bad guys to go first. I'm willing to, give you 1 momentum. And you go, you know what? I think I can beat them on whatever thing happens here. So sure, let's do it.
Okay.
Right. And so then you would pass and we would stop and I would add 1 momentum to your pool. So now you're at 3. And now the bad guys, the pursuers in this case, would take the first maneuver, which is
Okay.
like a chase action.
Yep.
And so based on the action and their success or failure, it might modify the momentum pool. So if we were to look at one of the actions like floor it, right?
Yeah, floor's actually a great example because that one there's kind of 2 options where
Yep.
you can test with a standard test, which gives you plus or minus 1 to your momentum,
Yep.
or you can also kind of go balls out, a bit more risky, test with a disadvantage, but also get a better penalty or a higher penalty or a higher bonus to your momentum pool. I think that's a great one to actually discuss.
Yeah. So the idea would be if the bad guys are going first, I'd be like, all right, they're gonna floor it. They roll with disadvantage. So they make their roll. Let's say they're successful, right? Now, knowing that my goal to catch you is to reduce your momentum to 0, I'm going to choose I was successful at disadvantage. I'm going to give you -2 momentum. So now you're down to 1,
Okay.
right? And then you, the party going second here, would then make a maneuver.
Okay, so then essentially I could either. Okay, now this is a part I want to discuss too with maneuvers, and I could either do a maneuver or I could also use one of the super spy car gadgets. Correct?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's what they're for.
Um so like say if I want to use my, hold on, I got to get there. I didn't have that page bookmarked. There
No,
we
you're
go.
all good. No worries. So most spy car gadgets don't actually impact momentum. What they do is they are actions that can be taken.
Yes.
So the intent there with the vehicles is if you had other people in the vehicle, you could have them do something that might like let's say you had somebody in your passenger seat, like informant you're trying to get out of town. You'd be like, you could say, here, fire these guns I have attached to my car, right?
Okay.
And they go, okay, sure. So that they would shoot. You would just resolve that like normal using the normal rules,
Okay.
right?
That's what I wasn't sure about. If that was like a normal rules or
Yeah.
if that was part of the chase.
Nope. That's just sort of the normal game happening inside the chase.
Okay,
But
gotcha,
it's
gotcha.
assumed that only the driver is really the person having to do the chase actions, the
Okay.
maneuvers.
Yeah, so
They
basically any passengers could do whatever
kind
it
of whatever they
is they
want.
need to
Yep,
do. Yeah, if throw grenades, shoot machine guns, whatever. Um,
exactly.
yeah, so essentially then I would just counter the maneuver with I'd either floor it, or I could do a fast turn or a flip U or a
Right.
stunt, which I would suspect that the stunts are kind of a very limited type of deal because in my mind, when I see the stunts, uh, God, this is probably dating me a bit. Gone in 60 Seconds, where
I mean,
Memphis Reigns,
which one though? The Nicolas Cage one or the previous one with Steve McQueen?
the Nicolas Cage one, he pulls up to that traffic and there's that truck there and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
got this nice ramp and he just floors it and up the ramp of this
He's in the
trailer
Shelby
truck.
Cobra. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
in the Shelby
yeah.
Cobra. Yeah. Eleanor.
I'm trying to think of some other.
Yeah,
Oh
well, you
God,
look
there was
at
a James Bond one.
think of is it Tomorrow
Where
Never Dies? I believe it is where Pierce Brosnan's James Bond ramps the boat out of MI6 into the Thames, right?
okay,
That would be a stunt. Or if you think of like Live Free and Die Hard, where John McClane ramps the car into the helicopter, that'd
yeah,
be a stunt, right?
yep, yep.
The stun action is basically just there for the GM to say, I need an action that this doesn't fit anything that's currently in the rules, but I need a way to adjudicate it. That's the stunt action. It has a static benefit. It can be anything you want that is not currently covered.
So I mean, yeah, I could essentially counter. Obviously, I could counter with a fast turn or something like that. Which then
Right.
it would be looking at this. It would be a standard test for me, and then the opponent must make this same action with a disadvantage.
Yep.
Or
If
you
you're
go first
successful.
the next round. Yeah, of course, if I'm
Right.
successful. So that does
Right.
change the order of things, which
Yep.
maybe actually that kind of has like a tactic to it in itself,
Well,
really, because you could be like, all right, you know what? You go first. And
right.
then basically plan ahead that my very first action
So
is fast
if
turn
if we
or
were
a
to
flip you.
pretend like you do something, and let's say it just um nets you no momentum, right? Let's say you fail whatever reason, right? So you're going to start the next round at one momentum.
Yep.
And then if it's not clear who's going first, you just do the whole bit again
Okay.
with your new momentum. And so you would be like, well, I want to make sure I go first. I bid one. And that's your maximum. Because you're at zero at that point, right?
Yep.
So, okay, so then you'd go first, you'd start. Let's say you did it successfully, you add two momentum to your pool, whatever that action looks like. And you're back at two. Well, if my bad guys who go second can reduce you by 2 to 0, they've caught you now. Because you check at the end where the momentum is.
Okay.
You
So
basically do
basically, before you
the whole
begin,
phase, you tally it up, and if there's still no resolution, you then go back to the bid phase.
okay. And then another thing that we really haven't discussed here too in the process
Yeah.
of while you're doing maneuvers. Basically, this is both sides while they're doing maneuvers. If if a maneuver requires a test, which pretty much all the maneuvers require a test, and the test is fail, you may immediately roll on the complications table. See
Yep.
page 45, which there is 6 different complications. It's essentially roll a d6, folks, and
Yep.
then it tells you what happens, and that's actually pretty clear. I mean, you wipe
Yeah.
out. Basically, you wipe out. You damage something. Hit a light post. Hit a telephone
Yep.
pole. You take damage. Um,
And the idea is they're generic enough you can kind of flavor them to whatever your chase scene is, right?
yes.
Like now, one of the things I call out in the book that I really recommend to people is Samjoko Publishing or Press. I can't remember if it's publishing or press, but Samjoko Publishing or Press has made what's called the Fighter Chase deck. They made it for their game Operators,
Yeah,
but
I was actually going to mention that, but
yeah,
I can't
it's a
find that here.
fantastic deck of cards that you can shuffle out, and they just have like prompts and pictures. In their game, there's a mechanical bit, but here you could use them like as prompts or pictures for what that action looks like. They have them for foot chases. You could easily use them for car chases, hand-to-hand fights, etc.
Yeah, I actually I got a small preview of them, and for those who are not, I would recommend them for those who are not extremely familiar with martial arts in particular, because there's a lot of different types of martial arts and boxing jabs and stuff like that in there. It can kind of help you narrate the fight and kind of picture what each different hand-to-hand combat maneuver would look like. Because to me, a game like this, essentially there's 2 forms of combat. You're either shooting a gun or you're more than likely probably using some types of martial arts fighting, uh,
Right.
you know, jujitsu or anything along those lines.
Mhm.
And the only reason I say that is I just don't imagine. I mean, you do see it in James Bond where you're like, you got the ninjas with the ninjatos and stuff like that, but I don't imagine that's something that's going to happen extremely often, where essentially a fight with your pistol could quickly turn into fisticuffs.
When I run Tiny Spies, it does. My Tiny Spy games are very much. Have you seen the Chris Hemsworth movie Extraction on Netflix?
No, sir. Unfortunately, I have
Well,
not.
well, one I recommend it. You should totally check it out.
Okay.
If you like, I'm a bit of a action movie. I don't want to say connoisseur, but like I devour them. Like I am all about taking in action movies and turning that into something. It's one of my favorite genres of movies. And the movie Extraction is an excellent example of what like a close quarters gunfight slash hand to hand fight might look like in Tiny Spies.
Another one. Oh God, I'm going to date myself again. I'm sorry, I'm old. Uh, the Jason Bourne series.
Yeah, it, it probably tells you something that I don't feel like you're dating yourself. So,
Ooh, okay. I'm trying to think of another one. Some of the more modern James Bonds too, where it's like,
yeah, the
the
Daniel Craig James Bond have some great examples. There's a lot of great movies from Thailand or Vietnam. The Man from Nowhere, the knife fight in The Man from Nowhere is absolutely one of the best knife fights ever put to television
I'm going to have
for
to see
camera.
that. I know my opinion. For those interested in sword fights, I love sword fighting. I'm a big fan of it. The Duelist has some of the absolute best
The
sword
Ridley Scott,
fights. Yes,
that's a great one. Yeah,
they and I, because I used to be in the SCA. I used to do
sure,
medieval style combat and stuff of that nature, and I even did fencing.
sure,
And I can't remember the name of the characters, but essentially you have the two main characters there, and
yep,
they're getting ready to duel with rapiers.
yep,
And it's literally two motions the fight's over
yeah,
because the guy goes to throw a thrust, the other guy he kind of ducks down and stabs up with his rapier and ends up stabbing the guy in the chest. And it's
yeah,
like, yes, that is real legit rapier fighting. It's that quick almost every
yep.
time.
One
This
of if you want to look into cinematic fight scenes, there's a movie called Seven Swords that has Donnie Yen in it. That is
okay.
some of the best like cinematic stage. They're not realistic at all, but they are very cinematically staged and they make excellent RPG fodder. And
Uh,
I can go on a whole thing about how violence in RPGs is a form of storytelling and communication, and most games one ignore it, and that causes GMs and players to ignore it, and that's wrong. I could go on for hours about that topic.
Oh, I could go out on that too. Folks, I'm going to plug my YouTube channel. The inaccuracies. I quote very often inaccuracies in various role playing games, and one of them I just did recently was on the falchion because
Oh, sure.
D&D makes the falchion sound like a giant scimitar, and it's like, nope, that's not a falchion. The other one that
Yeah.
drives me nuts too is the longsword, which is actually an arming sword. I don't want to get into it because
You should read my game Your Thrill, where it is called the Arming Sword, and the long sword is totally different.
yeah, I mean essentially the longsword is kind of like a stopgap between
Yep.
mm, the arming sword. The longsword is kind of
Now,
in the middle of the arming sword and the bastard sword,
now
realistically.
to be fair to RPGs, a lot of this is gameable material that isn't really relevant for playing the game.
True, true.
Like a sword, at the end of the day, for most fantasy RPGs, a sword's a sword. Like you kind of know what you're doing with it,
Um,
right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like getting detailed with equipment. I mean, my
and that's fun. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying for the purposes of writing the game,
oh yeah,
right? Like, it doesn't matter what. Generally speaking, you're rolling the sword the same way, no matter what it's kind of sort of is in most RPGs, right?
hmm
D&D, roll a d20, add your stuff, right? Tiny d6, make a test. Master tells you what you roll, not the sword. What I'm talking about is the way a character fights, the weapons they choose to use, and the way they conduct themselves when violence is happening is a form of character communication. It is
oh
telling you who they are as a person and a character, right? Like one of the big examples I use is Captain America. The fact that Captain America fights with a shield is telling you something about who he is as a person. The
yeah,
fact that Bucky uses his metal arm in a cinder block in the Winter Soldier or in a Civil War when they're having that apartment fight, that's telling you something about Bucky. There's a reason he just like hits a guy with a cinder block and Cap doesn't, right? And so when I'm talking about violence as a form of communication, I am saying these things matter, and a lot of games don't make them matter. And that's something that Tiny D6 isn't the game where I can make that matter because it's too minimalist. I would disrupt the game by tying that in.
yeah. To kind of make that matter. I mean, I guess you kind of get the another way you could look at it too is Fistful of Dollars,
Yeah,
where the bad guy will use the lever action rifle and the good guy's using a revolver. Um, and it's a nice showdown that they have, but it kind of
yeah,
indicates the character, because the revolver, in my opinion, just peering into law enforcement, the revolver is definitely the better bounty hunter law enforcement type weapon than the lever action would have been. And the bad guy kind of had a cocky attitude about the lever action, because his opinion about the rifle is always superior to the pistol. So he kind of had this "I got a superior" attitude
sure.
the whole movie. Of course, he was
Yeah,
supposed to be the big
there's a
bad
lot of
guy.
nuance and complexity there, and that's definitely a design challenge when it comes to something like Tiny Spies, right? Like, I don't detail weapons beyond is it small or is it big?
Yeah.
Those are the things that matter.
Um, I think we kind of got off topic here. That really, we covered the chase mechanics, I would say, actually pretty
Yeah.
good, and we could probably just sit here and jaw jack about different things in gaming,
Oh,
movies, and so on. But I think that pretty
yeah.
much wraps it up realistically.
No
Um,
worries. I uh I assume if you are an SCA guy, you are familiar with the Riddle of Steel and the Iron Throne, spiritual successor to it, RPG wise.
uh, I don't know it off the top of my head, especially the Riddle of Steel. I know the Riddle of Steel has something to do with the steel is only as strong as the hand that wields it, and
Well,
the hand
that's
that
that's
wields
the
it is only as
yeah,
strong as the steel. It's something along those
that's
lines.
the Conan quote. But there was an RPG, and I might be mistaking SCA and it starts with an H now. I can't remember.
Is it? I
Heffa,
think it's
Heffa,
Hema or something like
Hema.
that.
Thank you. But it was a very realistic oriented martial RPG
Okay.
that was
Okay.
drawn from a lot of. I think it was Hema. That was drawn from a lot of Hema, and the Iron Throne is sort of the modernist spiritual successor to that game.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'm
just a tip:
honestly not
if you're into
familiar.
that, you might want to take a look at it.
Might have to. Um,
There you
but yeah, so there you go, folks. I know we kind of got in a rant, but hopefully everyone enjoyed it. I'm going to wrap up today's video at that. Alan, is there anything else before we
go.
call
Crack
it?
my Kickstarter so I can eat. Do
There
that.
you go. Back his Kickstarter so you can eat, because it can be hard, especially nowadays being a game developer. There's a lot of competition out there right now. It's crazy.
No, I mean, it's competition. There's only so much money to go around, but there's a lot of really great games that deserve your money. And so, you can buy mine, but just go back a game, even if it's not mine.
There you go.
Like, get a cool game and then have fun with it. Like, that's what you should do today. So there's your daily goal.
There you go, folks. Get yourself a game. Get yourself Tiny Spies. I recommend it.
I won't say no.
All right, folks. Have a good day. All right, folks. So there you go. As you could tell, it kind of got a little sidetracked there, but we just kind of enjoyed talking about gaming and different aspects about gaming, movies, things of that nature, and hopefully it gave a lot of people information and ideas, things of that nature, and hopefully you all enjoyed this video. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up at that. It's been a long video. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and have yourselves a wonderful day.